Good morning, everyone. J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I now call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 66 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
I go into committee business. There's a couple of things we're going to discuss today. I might appear somewhat distracted today. If you've not heard, there's a forest fire in my riding. It's actually not far from St. Andrews, a place that I know government members know well because you keep coming back and you're welcome there again. It's 15 kilometers away. So I've been in touch with Dominic LeBlanc as well as local officials, but it is out of control at this point. So I'll be relying on the clerk today. We do have a good team on the ground there. The firefighters are working hard. There are, at this point, 7 water bombers in the area. And by kind of New Brunswick standards, it's quite serious. Of course, it would pale in comparison to anything we've seen in Western Canada recently, given their vast size, but given that it's close to population centres, it is quite serious. So, on that note, I'm going to return to the committee business. At the last meeting, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés gave notice of the following motion: that the committee requests that the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics forward to the committee all documents and correspondence received from Ms. Pascale Fournier, ex-president and CEO of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. So why don't I turn to you, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, if you'd like to address this, and we can discuss it and see if we can come to any consensus. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. It has been called to our attention that the Ethics Committee, after meeting with Madame Pascale Fournier, had received documents which were of great interest to them in the study on foreign interference, more specifically on management of the Trudeau Foundation. What happened is that there was a lot of information submitted at that time. The Ethics Committee was looking at foreign interference generally, but it would be more appropriate for the Public Accounts Committee to look at the management process of an organization which received public funding, such as the case with the Trudeau Foundation. And so we've tabled this motion because it corresponds perfectly with our future meetings with the Trudeau Foundation next week. I think it would be highly relevant to obtain this document as quickly as possible so as to be able to properly do our work during our meetings that are scheduled for next week with the Trudeau Foundation. The documents include emails, communications. We know that these documents were provided by the Trudeau Foundation itself, by Madame Fournier, so it would be very relevant for our study to be able to have access to those documents. And so I hope to obtain consensus about this because we've already passed a motion in order to have witnesses for the Trudeau Foundation. So it's along the same lines. It's important to have access to these documents to be properly informed for these meetings. Thank you. Thank you. Any comments? Yes? Ms. Shanahan. Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to understand. These documents had already been submitted to the committee, to the Ethics Committee? Chair, as you know, that I don't like having redundancy between committees when we're doing work. I'm trying to understand the relevance. First of all, are these documents, because this resolution that we have before us we're asking that there is a CRA investigation of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and we believe it's in the public interest. But I would like to know whether these documents, these emails, etc., are we talking about taxes in these issues, in these documents? Are the tax documents with tax issues with regards to the donations? If the Ethics Committee already has access to these documents, perhaps our clerk could find out. Now, maybe I haven't seen the list of witnesses, but is Madame Fournier going to be testifying before us? Because we're really taking a different track in this committee that I've never seen. So I think in the interest of efficient work, I think it's important to have a better idea of why it is that these documents, we don't even know if they're documents, we're talking about emails and various exchanges from a former director of the foundation. So I'm wondering about this, and I'm wondering whether, if we can't answer these questions today, perhaps we could just set this aside until we've been able to question our colleagues on the Ethics Committee. Thank you. I have some comments. Thank you for your comments. Ms. Fournier is not a witness here. According to the clerk, even if we were to request these documents, the other committee must discuss this and decide themselves whether or not they will be sending them here. I have no idea what these documents contain. Clerk, do you have any comments? Have I understood this correctly? Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, over to you. Well, first of all, it's a good thing that you've mentioned that we don't want to repeat work being done by other committees. But these documents are not the focus of the Ethics Committee study. We were looking more specifically at the Trudeau Foundation, and these documents concern the Trudeau Foundation. The Ethics Committee wants to look at foreign interference generally, so they cannot focus on documents that were provided by Ms. Sinclair because some of the issues remained without answer, so Ms. Fournier followed up by sending documents. So it's highly relevant for us because we are looking at the Trudeau Foundation in detail, so it's highly relevant for us to examine these documents and have access to them. So that's to answer your question. There's no redundancy here. It gives us an opportunity to do our work. In terms of the actual documents, of course, we can't go into detail because these documents are confidential at this time because the study was done in camera. We would like to access them to be able to conduct our Trudeau Foundation study. Mr. Fagascaro.
Just a simple question to our colleague. To what end? How is this going to benefit the work of this committee? How will this allow us to carry out our role as members of a committee that sit on the Audit Committee of Parliament that have as a first obligation to review the reports of the Auditor General and then follow up with public servants in particular to understand what has been done to rectify challenges and problems that exist. I wouldn't want to blame, of course, my colleague for politicizing this committee. That's not what I'm saying, although others might point in that direction. I'm not sure. But I'm just struggling to see the overall goal here. What exactly is the aim in this motion when other committees are very well placed and are looking at exactly the same thing?
Une petite seconde. You did have your hand up, Ms. Shannon. Do you have a point before I hear from Madame Secrétaire? Non, Madame Secrétaire, il y a une liste ici, puis j'essaie de le suivre. Madame Shanahan.
There's a list here and I'm trying to follow it. Ms. Shanahan? Yes. Thank you. Yes, clearly it's along the same lines as what was said earlier, but I'm trying to also understand what you've just said, Chair, that ethics has its own work, and so the fact that the documents are tabled with one committee does not automatically mean that there's an easy transfer to another committee. Ms. Fournier is a former employee. Everybody knows, this is highly public, that her departure was not done in the best of terms and circumstances. And so there could be a whole debate about he said, she said. And as my colleague has just said, this is really not our role here. This committee doesn't have the role of getting into this sort of thing. It's like as though in a department there were a conflict between civil servants, and we shouldn't get involved in that and say, oh, we think you're right and the other one is wrong. I think we should stick to verified information which can objectively point us to highlights and conclusions. And it is in all of our interests to discover these. Thank you very much. Ms. Sinclair de Gagné. Thank you. So let me begin by responding to my colleague, Mr. Fajus-Gattos. Whether my opposing colleague likes it or not, the committee decided to study the management of the Trudeau Foundation. So this has to be very clear. We are conducting a study of the Trudeau Foundation. So what would this do, Mr. Fajus-Gattos? It would enable us to do our job. In other words, have an in-depth study on the way in which an organization receiving public funding is managed. In the documents, there is written evidence of certain facts that have been related. And here I answer Ms. Shanahan's questions. These documents represent written evidence. It's not about he said, she said. We have written evidence, and we will obtain the answers that we wish to obtain and that we have asked witnesses. So if witnesses contradict themselves, well, let's look for evidence. Let's look at what's written in the emails and in the documents which have been provided. That's evidence, and that's what will enable us to do our work, which involves verifying what has happened and what continues to be happening at the Trudeau Foundation, because we have not yet received any valid conclusions. So the Public Accounts Committee has decided to undertake a study on the Trudeau Foundation. It is our duty to do this, and we will be able to do it. The public has a right to know. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Yip.
Thank you, Chair. I just feel that we're getting farther and farther away from our work, reviewing Auditor General reports as well as looking at the time remaining in the schedule. We should be really wrapping up our draft reports.
All right, then. Yes, Ms. Shanahan.
Je pense que si on va rentrer dans le doublement.
I think if we're going to start duplicating work, we should do it 100%. I imagine there were other documents provided dealing with this same issue of who did what. Now, frankly, this is not my goal. I would prefer to stick to the documents that have been audited, that were properly and professionally done. Reports, we're talking about tax management, budget management, financial management. We're not talking about human resource management or any other kind of management. Again, Chair, perhaps we could ask, have our clerk ask the Ethics Committee about the other documents which have been tabled by Mr. Rosenberg, for example, or any other individuals. And we can study all of them. If we're going to duplicate work being done by the Ethics Committee, well, let's go all in.
I'm going to turn to Garnet in a second, then Madame Sinclair de Gagné. I'll just respond, Ms. Shanahan. Ms. Shanahan, I've heard that request. The motion's before the committee. I'm trying to weave it in, but at this point, I still want to hear from a few more people. But your request is to seek information for the clerk to come back. So I have heard that, and I'll see how. Peut-être Madame Sinclair de Gagné aurait des commentaires sur.
Ms. Sinclair de Gagné may have comments as well. Mr. Jings.
Briefly, Chair, it's quite absurd to hear members of the government worry about spending time on this as a result of this motion. This motion is a request for documents that will aid us in our study of something this committee has already agreed to study, and that members opposite eventually voted in favor of agreeing to study. What is taking time is needless ongoing debate on this motion. If these documents have already been given to another committee, and we feel, and even one member feels that looking at these documents would be useful for this committee as well, I don't know why we wouldn't just easily say yes to that. And again, if people are concerned about the time this is taking, requesting the document isn't taking any time, except insofar as it's taking time because members of the Liberal caucus continue to try to delay the vital accountability work that we're trying to do as it relates to the Trudeau Foundation. We need to get to the bottom of what happened to the Trudeau Foundation. We saw a filibuster last week on Mr. McCauley's motion, and then a move to adjourn debate requesting documents from CRA. We're just trying to get the documents that will allow us to do our work and find out what happened to the Trudeau Foundation. And it is mighty suspicious that we see continuing efforts to find excuses to not get these documents. But it's particularly odd, particularly strange that the government says, "Oh, we shouldn't. Let's spend a long time talking about this motion to determine if we actually have time to do this. We're just requesting documents for a study that we've already agreed to do."
Thank you. Mr. Sidhu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and with all due respect to my colleague in terms of delay tax.
Mr. Sidhu, I'm just going to pause you.
This might not be a technical issue.
yeah.
It might be just part of the delay tactics we're seeing, right?
Someone's throttled
Right.
your.
I mean, we're not talking about women's
your
reproductive
internet.
rights around the world. I mean,
there
that
you go.
can go on for a few days to come from the Conservatives. But let's get back on to what we're talking about here. And I want to kind of talk about
Mr. Sidhu, can you hear me? Could you just start from the top again? Your internet was throttled. We thought it might have been a delayed tactic. Clearly, it is working now. If you could start from the start, as our Speaker in the House likes to say.
I would love to. No, while I was talking in respect to my colleague there, there's no delay tactics here. Every committee conducts important studies. When we see from my colleague and we're talking about women's reproductive rights around the world, for those watching, go back and watch the colleague that just talked about delay tactics. But going back to what we're talking about is our mandate, and it's important for Canadians to know which each committee's mandate is. And so I think we need to stay on our mandate. And our mandate, and I'm reading from the House of Commons website, is the mandate of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is to review and report on the public accounts of Canada and all reports of the Auditor General of Canada. I know this study may be important to some colleagues, but I don't believe this is a committee to do it on. We have important work in front of us, and I think we need to stay and work towards the mandate that Canadians have given us on this committee.
Merci beaucoup. Oui,
Thank you very much. Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, your turn. Go ahead. My colleague was absent during the debate of the motion about studying the Trudeau Foundation, but this is the mandate that Canadians and Quebecers gave to us to conduct an in-depth study of what happened at the Trudeau Foundation, which received public funding. So this is clearly in line with the objectives of the committee. So thank you for your intervention. It wasn't very relevant. A quick question. Is this to answer Ms. Shanahan's issue in terms of communicating, to have our clerks speak to them, to have more information? Yes, very well. What's happening is, in order for the Ethics Committee to send us the documents, we have to ask for them first. That's the first step that we do. We will ask the Ethics Committee, and that committee will be able to share the documents with us.
I believe it was Mr. Fragascatos and then Ms. Shanahan. Go ahead, sir.
Our colleague across the way used the term odd and then strange to describe our opposition to what Madame Sinclair Desgagnés has raised. There's nothing strange or odd, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, in having a challenge with this committee looking at documents that are already being looked at by another committee. I think Canadians send us to this place to do serious work and not redundant work. That committee will be able to look at the relevant documents and draw conclusions based on those documents. I think we should be doing the important work that's been set out at this committee. Generally speaking, when this committee has not been politicized in particular, we have been able to complete serious work in a timely way that has allowed us to live up to the mandate of the committee. Unfortunately, and yes, arguments have been raised in relation to a motion that our side did support, but there was nothing in that motion that said we would be carrying out redundant work. Another committee is doing this work already. I have a real challenge with seeing again the point of this motion, with all due respect. What is the efficacy behind going ahead and supporting this particular motion? I don't see the relevance. I don't see how it would help our work. I don't see how it would help to add to the motion that that was originally put forward and supported by this side as well, with respect to the Trudeau Foundation. If I recall back to that original motion, we set aside 2 meetings for to look at the issue. If you look at the amount of time, and I don't have that in front of me, Mr. Chair, but if you look at the amount of time that we've expended, I won't say wasted, I'll be kind. If you look at the amount of time that's been expended on the subject, we are eating up valuable time here that could have been, again, used to look at a range of issues as a committee. So I'll leave that there for now, Mr. Chair, and I think Ms. Shanahan had something to add too.
I believe so. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
I just wanted to answer my colleague, Mr. Genuis, who is still fairly new to this committee, that the way this committee works is by consensus. That is really the best way to work. And Mr. McCauley knows this to be true. And I think it's because we're acting on behalf of all Canadians, of all parliamentarians. It is supposed to be a committee that is nonpartisan, that is objective, and where we're looking at verified reports, and where, frankly, our work is to, because sometimes documents and accounting statements and so on don't get amplified the way that they should, but where we are able as a committee to explore and where we have in this committee taken the committee in a direction which I find very laudable, and that is studying the Environment Commissioner's reports, which come under the auspices of the Auditor General, and where we have been able to lift up those reports and amplify those very important findings and conclusion. And so that is why it's important for us to have these discussions. Because if we're going to take public accounts in a radically different direction, I would say that to my colleagues that hope to form government one day, you will be saddled with the consequences of that, and I don't think it's a very positive direction for anyone that is represented here today. So that is why I think the discussion is important. It just seems like a laundry list to me of what we're asking for, doubling of work, spilling into other mandates, and quite frankly, I have to question the motives of some members here, and I don't like to be in that position because it has not been my position on this committee in the past. Thank you.
Mr. McCauley, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'll just say that the three of us do support this motion. I think it's important for transparency. To Ms. Shanahan's comment, when we are in government, I do hope we are saddled with committees that are seeking openness and transparency and justice for taxpayers' dollars. This idea that consensus seems to be do it the Liberal way unless it's consensus. Do what we say unless it's not consensus. Consensus doesn't mean just what the Liberal government wants or wants to shut down. consensus, I think, if we go to a vote, you'll see that 5 of the members on this side from 3 parties support this motion. It's ridiculous to say that the government, that it's duplicating work. This is a very important issue we're dealing with right now, and expands into other areas that we're seeing covered up by this government. I think it's offensive to say that there's ulterior motives from our colleague from the Bloc. Her only motive I've seen from the day I've met her is openness and transparency of taxpayers' dollars. And coming from a conservative, I can't think of higher praise I can say to another member of this House is we want openness and we want to see value for money spent. So we fully support this motion. I thank her for bringing it forward and continuing to support it.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, could you call the vote, please?
Mr. Jennings.
In favor.
Mr. Cram.
In favor.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes, please.
Madame Sinclair de Gagny.
Oui.
Mr. Desjardins.
Yes.
Miss Bradford.
Opposed.
Mr. Fragiscatos. Miss Shanahan.
No.
Mr. Sidhu.
Against?
Miss Yip.
No.
Yeas pour 5, nays contre 5.
I'll cast my vote in favor of Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés' motion. Thank you. Mr. McCauley, you have indicated to me you'd like to raise. You've caught my eye.
I've
Go
got a
ahead.
couple items, Chair. Thanks very much. First one, I'm just going to read a motion to put on notice. I'm not going to move it right now. That in the context of, and I apologize for butchering the French here, that in the context of Service à la Famille Chinois du Grand Montréal, a registered charity, in Centro-Sino, Quebec, de la Rive Sud, a registered not-for-profit, having been identified as hosting illegal communist Chinese police stations, and having both received over $100,000 each in funding by this government, that the committee hold at least 3 meetings on the issue and invite ministers and departmental officials from ESDC, Public Safety, and Revenue to appear before the committee and answer questions.
And that is simply on notice. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. And then the second one is just tabling a motion that the committee resume consideration of the motion moved and adjourned at meeting number 64 on May 15th, 2023 regarding the documents from the Trudeau Foundation.
I'm just going to hold. I want to see if this is a dilatory or debatable motion. 1 second. It is debatable. So the floor is open to bring back Mr.
Chair, just a point of order.
Go ahead.
My understanding was that a resumption motion is dilatory. Which, it's fine. It's fine, but maybe just get clarification.
I will do that. One
Okay.
sec, please. Thank you, Mr. Genuis. Oh, miscommunication here at the head of the table. So this is a motion to resurrect Mr. McCauley's motion dealing with the tax documents that was previously adjourned. And it's not debatable. So we vote to bring it back basically for a floor, to the floor for a discussion. Say point of order. Yes.
Point of order. My understanding is procedurally, wouldn't we go back to the block sub-amendment first?
Well,
Oh, okay. Okay.
if we get to that point, yes,
All right,
correct.
then.
This is
Okay.
this
I
is
understand.
first to bring it back. So, Mr. Clerk, could you call a roll call, albeit quickly, because one member, une membre n'est pas encore ici, puis il y a une.
One member is still not here, and there is a vote, so I think we'll begin now.
In favor.
Mr. Cram,
In favor.
Mr. McCauley,
In favor.
Madame Sinclair Desgagnés,
Oui.
Mr. Desjarlais.
Sorry, clerk, I'm just a bit confused. Are we voting on the amendment or on the?
So,
Sorry,
Mr.
Clerk.
Daly, this
Or Chair,
is
go ahead.
just to bring this debate back. When we last debated this motion to request some of the tax filings from the Trudeau Foundation, we'd had a discussion around it. And after some time, members voted to end that debate. The motion wasn't defeated. So this motion is merely to bring it back to discuss it here.
I see. Oh, yes.
Opposed.
Apologies, Ms. Bradford,
Opposed.
Mr. Fragiscatos,
No.
Ms. Shanahan,
No.
Mr. Sidhu,
No.
Ms. Yip,
No.
yeas pour 5, nays contre 5.
So I'll cast my vote to continue discussing this motion since it is on the docket. We're going to begin with the sub-amendment to the motion. Mr. Clerk, if you could perhaps remind us where we're at, and then I see Mr. Genuous, but why don't we hear from the clerk first?
So yeah, if, members can just follow on our website the last minutes of meeting 64. You have the motion and the amendment moved by Madame Marie-Hélène Gaudreau. If you want, the committee wants, I can read the motion, but the motion and the amendment is clearly worded in the minutes of this meeting. If the committee wants, I can read the amendment, maybe.
It's probably a good idea as a refresher. I think so.
So then, Madame Marie-Hélène Gaudreau moved that the motion be amended by adding before the words "all documents related to any audit" the following, quote, "and as requested by the committee in its report number 27, asking the Canada Revenue Agency to investigate the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, comma, end of quote." That would be the amendment, and we are resuming debate on the amendment.
Very good. Do I have speakers on that, please? Yes, Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, at the meeting when this amendment was introduced, it was Madame Gaudreau that was representing the bloc. So I would like to hear from Madame Sinclair Desgagnés on this motion, because the questions that I was bringing up at that time had to do with the pertinence of this amendment to this motion. It seeks to replicate a motion that has already been passed by this committee, and I would remind colleagues and those that are following this that it was a motion that asked the Canada Revenue Agency to investigate the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and that the committee believes that it's in the public interest to prioritize this investigation. And it was on that basis that at that time I supported that motion, because it is fitting for this committee, as items of interest come to our attention, that we can ask any agency, normally we deal with the Auditor General's office, that we can ask respectfully in their role as an independent agency, and I stress that because it's not the government, whether we're talking about the Auditor General or the Canada Revenue Agency. These are independent agencies. They are governed by professional standards. These standards are internationally recognized, and it is only fitting that if we see something that we would like to bring to their notice, that we can make that request. And that is why we voted with that motion, because that is how this committee works. is by consensus. When we have something that is of mutual interest, then we proceed accordingly. And I'm always open to questions of whether a process or procedures or implementation or execution of any of our policies, and when I say our, that is ours as a federal government, not as one particular government in question, because it goes to the trust and the confidence that Canadians have in our agencies and our nonpartisan public service, that when there are any questions of however they come about, that any of our policies that are in law that have to do with the collection of taxes, that have to do with charitable organizations, that have to do with the way that our agencies function, that it is paramount that that these reviews take place in an impartial and objective manner. And as I say, that is why, for my part, even though personally I might not think that there's a need for it, because again, the work has been done and it's been done elsewhere, but in the interests of clearing the air, then making a request of that nature is something that I think is appropriate or fitting, or certainly can come under this committee's mandate. So it is, and that we asked to prioritize the investigation. Well, Chair, as you know, we can ask many things, but it is up to the agency themselves to decide what their priorities are. And we heard very clearly, actually, from the officials here that the moment that they have any kind of report, red flag, I think it's the tip line that it's known colloquially, that Canadians can call the CRA and report an organization or an individual or a business that they have had that they have suspicions about, or that they feel that there's something incorrect going out. And it's in that way that all Canadians can participate in kind of this mutual, just keeping everybody sharp and keeping everybody in line. And the officials assured us that when they get that kind of a tip, that it is investigated. So indeed, it was also on that basis that, for my part, well, it's already been brought to their attention. They're already looking at the documentation. They're able to work, of course, under confidentiality provisions and so on, work in a way that is not injurious unduly to third parties, whether directly or indirectly, because that's another thing that we have to be wary of, that investigations become witch hunts, and that they're conducted in a way that is unbecoming of a country like ours, where we are known internationally for our institutions and agencies that act in a professional and impartial manner based on the facts before them, and but at the same time that are very sensitive to the concerns and the perceptions of Canadians, and that they will do their due diligence on their side for anything that comes to their attention. So I I would like to hear from Madame Sinclair Desgagnés on why she feels it's necessary to include this amendment. I feel like it's redundant. I'm really not clear on why this needs to be here. I have lots to say, of course, on the motion itself, but I am limiting myself at this time on the amendment, Chair, as is fitting to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Noted. Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je remercie ma collègue pour la question.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to my colleague for this question because it gives me an opportunity to express myself on the subject. I'm always very happy to hear Liberals across the table talk about transparency and democracy because it's an opportunity for me to remind them that the basic foundation of trust is, in fact, transparency. Canadian and Quebecers' trust in democratic institutions flows from transparency. And in this case, the motion introduced by the Conservative colleagues are targeting documents which have been refused to us by CRA during the committee meeting. And my colleague led the amendment, but we were there when we received the reaction from the CRA colleague. We asked the question, they couldn't answer. So this is the same lines as what we were trying to do. In other words, study what happened at the Trudeau Foundation. So to give a more specific answer about the amendment, this amendment is very simple. It is simply seeking to ensure that this motion is part of our study of the Trudeau Foundation, that the documents that CRA will provide on the Trudeau Foundation can be used in this study. And back to the same arguments as for the last motion. We have the mandate together, all of us here in this committee. You wanted to talk about consensus. Well, yes, we already have the mandate to study what is being done at the Trudeau Foundation. So within the scope of this mandate, we have to study documents. Are these documents provided by former managers of the foundation or by Canadian institutions such as CRA? It's essential for us to be able to shed light on what is happening at the Trudeau Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 points to raise. First, to kind of follow what I was talking about earlier, I see redundancy here. I don't see, again, with great respect, how this particular sub-amendment to Mr. McCauley's motion changes the substance of his motion in such a way that it would be worthy of all this time we've given to debating it. I don't see it. I also see that this is the bigger problem, and we'll get into it, I'm sure, whenever we get past this particular debate. But the enormous number of problems with Mr. McCauley's motion, particularly on the way that it would compromise the position of public servants, in this case at the Canada Revenue Agency. We heard a very lengthy testimony on the part of the Commissioner of the CRA, along with other senior officials, on the importance of the privacy provisions of the Income Tax Act. Our colleague from the Bloc has passionately shared with us, why this sub-amendment is so critical, but at no point have I heard her say how she feels on what was raised in that particular meeting with respect to privacy and whether or not what Mr. McCauley has called for compromises that, as I believe it does. Now, if she was to raise that here, you might call her out of order because it's not directly on her sub-amendment. But even still, I want to hear her point of view eventually on that. But I think the relevance I go back to the first argument, and this is entirely in order. Where is the relevance of this particular sub-amendment in terms of the overall motion? I see it as, again, being redundant, and I don't know how it gets us any further in terms of this committee's work. We did agree, yes, to 2 meetings to study the issue at hand. The Trudeau Foundation and the Canada Revenue Agency was brought in. We've done a lot of work on that so far. I thought it was valuable to hear the position and concerns of the CRA, and perhaps opposition colleagues were not satisfied. They seem to have been spinning their tires a bit, not able to get answers to, dare I say, provide material for things like question period, among other things. But the CRA is certainly limited in what it can say about the status and situation of particular charities. It did not get, the issue was not on that day politicized, and it should not be politicized. But we continue to see a situation here where the Bloc and the Conservatives are aligning to take this issue and put it at the front and center of the agenda of this committee. I don't see it as appropriate. I'm looking at, or I had in front of me a moment ago, the list is gone, but in any case, it was on future work of this committee. A number of very important issues to be dealt with, including the consideration of draft reports. I know we'll be hopefully getting into that later today, Mr. Chair. But there's a number of important subjects that we have in front of us. I believe it's testimony from Correctional Services Canada, understanding the situation in prisons, following up and putting forward a report on that. This is critical work. Again, we don't advance the objectives of this committee by pursuing, with all due respect, amendments or sub-amendments rather that are redundant. So I just wanted to put that on the record, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Président, justement,
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to respond to my colleague on the subject of this principle of transparency. There is another principle, and that's confidentiality of data. And I have already sat with this, her colleague, Ms. Gaudreau, in another session on another committee of Parliament, and there was a very intense debate dealing with the importance of protecting private data of Canadians. And how the government was not sensitive enough to this issue. And now here, we're talking about, well, I don't think it's my colleague's wish, but we're talking about the possibility that maybe not here, but that the Pandora's box could be opened, and that confidential data of taxpayers can be exposed during a public investigation of Parliament. By Parliament, I could say partisan public investigation, when there is absolutely no reason for opening this box, because we have agencies equipped to do this sort of investigation. And yes, they can go all the way through either with fines or criminal prosecution, if need be. These measures can be taken against people who run counter to our tax laws. Because I know for the members of my riding, confidentiality is the very highly subject to, well, once confidentiality is broken, it's subject to abuse and fraud and scams and identity fraud. And if you speak directly to a charitable organization, several of the people I represent are involved in all kinds of charities. And they're very pleased to be able to contribute. without necessarily being aware of all of the ways in which that organization is managed. They give a donation to a charitable organization with a number provided by Revenue Canada. That's all done in properly, so they make their contribution with confidence. And that information is made public. I remember about 15 years ago, there was really an issue. People no longer knew who they were dealing with. So that is a transparency tool. And it was one which was very well received by the public and by CRA. The idea is to make public the charitable organization's numbers for those who had a license or a registration number. And then Canadians had greater confidence that they were dealing. I say greater confidence because, that's not the whole story. Of course, an organization can begin and fulfill all of the criteria to be able to obtain a charitable organization registration number. And then maybe sometime later, there could be things that weren't done properly in terms of the way in which they were managed. And at that point, the system of notifying CRA becomes very useful. And this was very well communicated to the public at the time. In other words, if you have any questions regarding a charitable organization, this is how to proceed, and so as to be able to notify Revenue Canada. But if after the CRA had to publish the names of every single donor and all the private information of every donor, well, that causes harm to people who contributed perfectly innocently. They are not responsible for the management. So we have to put the right things in the right places. When you talk about privacy and data privacy, I think this is something which remains the responsibility of an agency such as the Canada Revenue Agency, an agency which statutorily.
Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Chair. The rules require the member to be both on topic and not repetitive. The member can't simply make all of the same arguments that you made last meeting again and again and again. And this is not on the topic of the amendment. So on both counts, I would ask that you either call her to order or go to the next person on the list.
I won't jump to that, but I would ask the member just to stay on track.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mais en fait, c'est parce.
Thank you, Chair. This is because my colleague raised the importance of transparency and said that this was the background behind her amendment, and that's why she was putting forth the amendment. So I believe that it's very important to understand that, yes, there is transparency, but there is also confidentiality of private data. And I think that this is the very reason why here in this debate it's our responsibility, Chair, to demonstrate that in fact, there is tension between these two issues. There's always a balance. There is a way of achieving the goal. And the goal is to ensure that charitable organizations operate in a manner which is consistent with our laws. Of course, they have a charitable mandate, and the agency, which is equipped by the law to investigate and to ensure that Canadians can trust these organizations when they deal with them, when they make donations. Canadians can know that the CRA also has its own legislation, its own criteria, and quite frankly, rather significant constraints as well. Because nobody would like to see data leaks of private information coming from an agency such as Canada Revenue Agency. So yes, transparency, when it adds to trust, to an improvement of the way in which our organizations, our charitable organizations, are managed. But no to irresponsible behavior in which everything is published and everything and whatever happens, third parties who for direct or indirect reasons are mixed up in all of this, and I've already seen this, Chair. Let me tell you that I have already seen investigations conducted by committees with the transparency goal, but constituents, people operating businesses, or who had perfectly legitimate activities, suddenly we're dealing with, oh, was this a liberal? Oh, is this a conservative? I've seen it. A conservative working with a liberal, well, both of them were tossed in the trash. Oh, that's no good. That's no good because a conservative and a liberal together. No, that can't possibly work. That kind of investigation is really not worthy of a parliamentary committee. And so I remain convinced that this is not about transparency here. What we're dealing with here is what we can publish in the Journal de Montréal. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Ms. Desjardins, you have the floor.
To my colleagues for, I think, being able to return to this important discussion. So I have two large questions, I think, in relation to this motion, which I think would be helpful for us to have a discussion about. One is I do think that it's in the public interest to ensure that we continue our investigation and get to the bottom of foreign interference and charitable donations. I do also recognize that it is a tremendous thing we're asking for. We're asking that the committee use our power and force to do something that I think has largely been undone in Canadian history before, which is to look at a private organization and a private group and attempt to force the CRA to demonstrate documents so that we can review them in this committee. And so I understand what we're doing here, but I also want to find a way to balance the force we're using, which is a tremendous amount of force that I think the public deserves accountability for that level of power as well, and the actual request or benefit that doing this kind of procedure will offer us. And so in order to maximize the benefit, because I agree with that we should do what we can to investigate the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. But I also think that there's a big question of, is this the appropriate amount of power to be using to do this? And so I'm kind of inclined to make it more worth our while if we can, and maybe even look into other instances where charitable donations have been received by political parties, and attempt to expand this motion if we have agreement across all of our groups, because I do think that I've heard from everyone here to suggest that we are here for the request of the public interest in investigating instances of foreign interference and other levels of interference in our electoral system by way of donations. And there have been organizations, not just the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, that have engaged in this across Canada. And so if we're going to be using this power, I see an opportunity for us to actually go even further and create more transparency for Canadians by including a list of other organizations. If we have maybe, let's say, a week to give that to you, Chair, to make it even more worth our while. If we're going to be using this extraordinary power, why not?
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my comments on redundancy in terms of the sub-amendment haven't been answered. So I'm happy to hear from our colleague from the Bloc on that specific point. And this is a question to Mr. Desjardins. If he could expand on what he's talking about exactly. I'm a bit unclear as to what exactly he's looking at here.
Thank you, Mr. Fragaskatos. Mr. Desjardins, I'll come back to you. Your hand is still up, and I assume that was from before, but I'm going to keep it up because that question was directed to you. Just to clarify, so we have a study already to look at the Trudeau Foundation, and this motion relates to documents. But Mr. Desjardins, if you do have a suggestion for a study or, I suppose, a sub-amendment to the amendment, I think members would be curious to hear that. Before I get to that, though, Mr. Genius, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think the proposition for Mr. Desjardins that we would look at potential foreign interference in terms of large foreign donations to other major entities, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think there are certain. I can think of one, Canada 2020, where it would be interesting to know what kind of foreign donations were made there. I don't doubt that there are small c conservative organizations people might be interested in asking the question about as well, and I think it's but the issue, there are particular issues with the Trudeau Foundation. There's a particular reason we're looking at the Trudeau Foundation, and that is because the Trudeau Foundation is a public institution. It, as we've discussed before, it has this very odd kind of governance structure. It spends some time saying, "Oh, we're a charity. Leave these poor charities alone," right? But the reality is, it's a so-called charity that has gotten a massive endowment from the government, and therefore is subject to various statutes. It's subject to access to information requests. It's subject to the Privacy Act. It's subject to the Federal Accountability Act. So this is defined in various statutes. It's a public institution, actually. So it does have a different status even from charitable or advocacy organizations that have for various other reasons, relationships with people in government. It's not unimportant as well that it shares the Prime Minister's name, that he remains, though listed as an active, he remains listed as a member of the Foundation, as part of a small number of members of the Foundation with governance powers that he apparently chooses not to exercise for the time being, but he has not resigned as a member of the Foundation. He remains a member of the Foundation. So the relationship between the Prime Minister and this Foundation, the attempts at foreign interference that we know occurred, and the public nature of this Foundation make it a very different kind of beast. So I think the questions the member raises are interesting and, in fact, worthy of study. But there are particular issues at the Trudeau Foundation, and we do have to define the scope of our work to some extent. So I just might suggest let's proceed with this work, but let's continue the discussion about what other areas of study are merited as well, because again, I think it's a very legitimate point to raise.
Back to you, Mr. Desjardins.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mr. Chair. And so I am pleased to know that there's some appetite to look at this, because I think the nature to our motive behind this work, which is the part to which I agree with the motion, is that we're trying to get to the bottom of foreign interference. To me, that is one of the most incredibly important purposes as to why this motion is something that I'm in favor for. But the part that I'm trying to balance with that, with the desire for me to get answers on foreign interference, it seems to me not appropriate to exclude other instances where we do have credible public interest motive for other organizations. You know, I do think it also creates kind of a fairness regime to look at for the period under the last government. You know, and Mr. McCauley made a really good point earlier, saying he would actually be in favor of looking at when a conservative or if a conservative government was to ever take place in Canada again, that they'd be very open to looking at any organization to which this kind of accusation would apply, because transparency is important and sunlight is the best kind of disinfectant. So on that principle, and I think it's shared amongst myself and conservatives, that we need to get to the bottom of these things, is to actually find ways to expand it. You know, I want to make it worth our while, if we're going to be able to exercise the incredible force of having the CRA give us documents related to a study on foreign interference, that it would seem negligent not to look at some key other organizations to determine whether or not there's a pattern here, whether or not it's affecting all parties. If we're talking about foreign interference, don't you think that it affects more than one party even? And so I'm concerned. I think it's an opportunity for us, should the opposition agree, maybe even the government would agree, to actually expanding this. And some of those organizations, it's no secret, during Harper's era, for example, the Fraser Institute, many concerns were made with they received $4 million the last decade from major American foundations. And so that relatively went unheard during that time. And so that's a large sum of money. And so, Mr. Chair, just these things exist as well on the opposite side. And just given Mr. McCauley's position on how willing the Conservatives might be to see a study similar to that, I suggest that we include the Fraser Institute.
So, Mr. Jesse, I never like to interrupt. I was reminded that we are addressing the amendment to the motion, and your concerns are valid. I'm looking for some direction from the committee here. I'm going to recognize Mr. Genuis in a second. I'll look to the will of the committee if we want to continue debating this amendment and the motion, or if we want to refer this to the subcommittee, because we are all over. We're getting well outside the amendment. So I am going to begin to focus us back on that, unless I get direction from the committee. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think we are seeing some delay tactics and from the government side, and I think we want to get this done. So I would not be in favor of adjourning this again. Let's just proceed on this. We have an amendment from the bloc on the floor. I did just want to say, in terms of Conservatives, it is of course true that foreign entities have tried to target all parties, I think. But it's also true that there is no equivalent Stephen Harper Foundation. There is not a Stephen Harper Foundation which got $125 million from taxpayers, where his children have privileged roles in governance. If there was such a foundation, and if at some future point one of Stephen Harper's children became the prime minister and there was a massive spike in foreign donations at that time, then I would think we should study those events. But those events have not occurred in the case of Conservatives. So we're looking at a particular series of events. So I don't think it makes sense to necessarily try to associate purely private organizations, as I said, with the particular issues around the Trudeau Foundation. I also think it is legitimate for this committee, if it wants to, at some point, to look at the broader issues around foreign contributions to influential private organizations in Canada, and to do so on a broader basis. But the reason to look at the Trudeau Foundation is particular to its nature as a public institution and its relationship with the Prime Minister and with the government. And the fact that this committee is already studying those issues, and that there is not an equivalent forum for these public issues to be studied at a public institution, because the Auditor General has already spoken about her limitations in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fragaskatos.
Mr. Chair, seeing the clock and knowing that the consideration of draft reports was scheduled, for 12 p.m. We're well past that now. I move that we now proceed to the consideration of draft reports scheduled, like I said, for 12 p.m.
Well, the debate continues. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor. So was that something more than I? Oh, okay.
Maybe you missed that.
I did miss that. I thought it was a suggestion. So that is in effect, you're moving to adjourn this debate.
The move was, I thought,
Yes.
pronounced. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
All right. Could you take the roll call on that, Mr. Clerk? This is to once again adjourn debate on this motion and the amendment.
Well, it's to proceed to the other item, which has the effect of adjourning. Right?
No, I have other committee business. So since I get to word the motion, that's well. How do you want to proceed, Mr. Fragascatos? I guess you did kind of tie it all together. I'm going to just check with the clerk here as well. Hold on. No. So you're looking to adjourn debate and move us into line by line.
I move to proceed to consideration of draft reports.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I understood, and that's what we're going to do. So okay, which will be to end this debate and then move us into camera to discuss the reports line by line. Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll call, please.
Mr. Genuis.
No.
Mr. Cram.
Opposed?
Mr. Macaulay.
No.
Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Non.
Mr. Desjarlais.
No.
Miss Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Yes.
Miss Shanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
Yes.
Miss Yip.
Yes.
Yeas pour 5, nays contre 5.
So I will vote to continue the debate. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor. Is it a point, Mr. Fragascatos? No. Okay, very good. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I am disappointed that we are not moving on to the draft reports because by my count, I think we're at 5 draft reports that we have yet to review, and I think there's even more on their way because that is the work of this committee, is producing and the tabling of reports to Parliament. And I feel that I must also address remarks by Mr. Genuis that regarding the Trudeau Foundation, that it's somehow a vehicle of the government. I just find that horrendous. That was, from my knowledge, a foundation that was established by Parliament. So after due debate and votes and that kind of thing, for the purpose of furthering education and exchanges with on the part of young people, and that it holds the name of Pierre Elliott Trudeau because, quite frankly, that is a name that resonates with young people that are. And here, Chair, I have to say that chez nous, la municipalité.
Where I'm from, the municipality of St. Remy is very proud that the family began in our region. And what's more, the Trudeau family and Pierre Elliott Trudeau at his own request are buried in a cemetery, a very modest cemetery in Saint-Rémy. It's a source of pride for the people back home. There are a lot of Trudeau relatives, and there are a lot who don't necessarily share all of Pierre Elliott Trudeau's sentiments. But we're talking about the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. We're here to discuss this. My colleague is trying to make a direct link between Trudeau's son, but the son is not the father. The name Pierre Elliott Trudeau is, if people chose that name, it is because that name is recognized. Similarly to John A. Macdonald, Wilfrid Laurier, Lester Pearson, names of historic personalities who are no longer with us. I think we can all agree that those names mean something. Is it always a good idea to proceed this way? We've seen situations in which there were readjustments in the light of new information, and that's also possible. We can always rename an organization and a foundation. But the fact remains, the objective, the mission, the raison d'être of the organization remains the same. If we're talking about our Prime Minister, he has said on several occasions that he is no longer active with the foundation. Which was fully within the criteria of the ethics commissioner. And he set aside the links. And so for people who are interested in the Trudeau name and the Trudeau family, they've had an opportunity to hear Alexandre Trudeau himself. I think it was during the Ethics Committee meeting. So for people who are curious and who want to know everything there is to know about the Trudeau family, I think it is a family which has played a very important role in our history and our political developments. I could ask my colleague. No, I won't go that far. But there are other foundations named after conservative personalities. And this isn't the first time that I've said this. I myself was a progressive conservative in the days of Joe Clark and Brian Mulroney. And I participated in several activities. I very much appreciated Flora MacDonald's work, for example. And I can support a Flora MacDonald's foundation. She was a formidable woman, and she did in her work. And the principle is that there are values, there are contributions which go beyond the political party. So perhaps one day there could even be a leader of the Bloc Québécois, because I do see that my Bloc Québécois colleagues are, and I'm always impressed by this, by the level of participation in the parliamentary debates. They're very aware of the rules. It's really a way to contribute to our democracy. And this is highly laudable. And I always tell my constituents that my Bloc Québécois colleagues are so active in Parliament that they like coming to Ottawa so much and participating in our wonderful federal Parliament. And that's a compliment that I am giving, because it's true. There are debates on human rights, on environmental issues. We have all points of view, and the same applies to our colleagues from the NDP. Of course, we share progressive values as well, and in this sense, the wish to honor one or another. For example, Jack Layton. He was a great Canadian. I think this may be something for Parliament to consider at some point. But it should be beyond partisan considerations. The honor that is being given, or that the foundation, well, it's kind of branding. When a foundation chooses a name, of course, it's because the foundation wants to share the same values as the person who carried that name and as that person represented. So that's laudable. But is it important to be reassured that a particular foundation is carrying out its duties when it comes to accountability, when it comes to source of donations, when it comes to carrying out its mandate, when it comes to respect for all laws, bylaws, rules, and beyond this, that their activities be beyond reproach? Yes. And so there's a reason that we have agencies and we have ways of ensuring that we monitor and that we can investigate properly. The capacity to either attribute corrections or fines, or even going so far as to more significant accusations. And there is a reason for which we, as a federal government, stopped. Because I think that early, at a given point, early in the parliamentary session, I think it was the work of, the investigatory work wasn't structured, but I think that following certain situations that were very difficult, governments, and regardless of whether they were liberal or conservative governments, the governments felt that it was appropriate to implement one or more agencies who were mandated and empowered to investigate confidentially. And then, if anything important to public protection was found, to make it public, and that these agencies, if we're talking about CRA or it could be, well, in this committee, of course, I prefer to work with the Office of the Auditor General. The Auditor General manages an office of some 600 professionals, and they are equipped in all senses of the term to investigate properly. But I understand, I heard my colleague, and she said the Auditor General was asked to investigate the donations coming from abroad and was not able to do so, saying it was not part of her mandate. So she correctly declined to conduct such an investigation. So colleagues still have questions, and so we refer to Revenue Canada. We have already heard testimony from civil servants. We've been reassured by these officials. Bob Hamilton, who was deputy minister, if you will. We were reassured that any request received to examine, investigate, question a foundation, charitable organization, whatever individual, when it comes to tax returns or tax-related activities or donation solicitation activities, etc. Well, that's their business. That's exactly why they exist. They investigate. They have all the tools they need so as to carry out that work. Are we aware of everything that they do? No. And rightly so. Our concern should be our civil servants who are duly mandated, our officials who are duly mandated. Do they have the responsibility? Do they have the tools? And are they carrying out their responsibilities? We're not there to do the work for them. They're the ones who are supposed to do the work. And luckily, we have people who are so respected, so professional. They are recognized across the globe. We've heard other testimonies here about how they are solicited by other organizations and other countries and how they work and how they share best practices. I think we could be happy. We should be proud that we have institutions that are duly installed by our democracy, working for the well-being of all Canadians. So, to my mind, Chair, because I believe that we're still dealing with Report 27, we made this request to the CRA. We asked them to conduct an investigation, and it's appropriate that we do so because we heard from officials. They could not confirm it. And I know that there are colleagues who would like to have all the details of everything. But we were reassured that any request made to them will be answered by them, and there is no reason for us to believe differently. If there are any other situations in which people would say, oh, you know, I reported this or that, and this was really not properly done, and nothing was done, and the organization continued, and that's not okay, and the CRA isn't doing its job, well, then we could ask the officials, what are you doing? But probably not this committee. I think there are other committees that are better equipped to work with the CRA directly. But at that point, we could work with the Auditor General, who has the mandate to ensure that any agency or government department regardless of their mandate, regardless of the program, regardless of the work that they have to do, the Auditor General and the Auditor General's team chooses the theme, the program, the operation, carries out the study, and they report back. And her reports are eagerly read by everybody. And then there is a press day, and the media is there, and it makes headlines. And that's as it should be, because we see how the Auditor General conducted studies on shortcomings that are systemic. We've seen how this has happened in the past when there were certain agencies or departments, including anything related to Indigenous services. And we see how there had been serious shortcomings. And I was how could I say this? I was, again, very much reassured that she took that mandate that came from one of your colleagues from New Brunswick, Mr. Ferguson, and who told us about how much of a priority it was for him, Chair, to really shed light on this topic. And we know from our colleague at the NDP, Mr. Desjardins, that this remains a critical priority. And we have work ahead of us. They're very serious questions. And quite frankly, instead of repeating the work being done by another committee or agency, this committee, well, it's more efficient because we're all really talking about efficiency and effectiveness. And the fact that we have to provide value for Canadians' dollars, that we have these reports that have not yet been published, they have not yet been tabled in the House, and they're piling up one on top of the other. Chair, I find that the priority of this committee really should be in the work that we have been mandated to do by Canadians. Thank you.
Et on vous remercie. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I'll yield to Ms. Yip, and then I'll speak after her.
Ms. Yip.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that my colleague, Ms. Shanahan, has brought up a valid point about this being the former Prime Minister's name on the foundation. It really is such an honor to remember our former Prime Minister. In fact, because of him, my family has always been a fan of the former Prime Minister, and in fact, because of him, our entire family has always been in support of him and his work. I would just like to say that the foundation themselves describes them as independent and nonpartisan. And I don't believe that we've really looked into the type of work, the excellent work that they do. The whole process lately has been really politicized, and that's really unfortunate because the foundation really does do amazing work. They help to fund and promote academic and public interest research.
Ms. Shipp, I'm just going to interrupt you. So the debate is on the amendment to the motion. Now, Mr. Januous did open the door to the discussion on the Trudeau Foundation. Ms. Shanahan addressed that at length. I would ask you that you focus on the amendment to the motion, please. That is the discussion at hand here. Thank you.
Well, I don't believe that we really need to go into that amendment. I feel that, no, I'm not done yet. I just feel that, we really don't need to repeat what's already been done here. We should really just focus on the work at hand. We have a busy schedule. There's not that much time left, and I've said this before. There's a number of reports that haven't been done. We don't want that sliding into the fall. After all, Canadians expect us to review the Auditor General's reports. In fact, some of the newer reports that we were supposed to look at don't even make this term's schedule. And in fact, some of the reports are now being placed into the fall. I don't believe that these additional motions are very helpful to what we actually do on this committee. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Fragascatos. You have the floor. I will make a quick comment. I think Mr. Desjardins raised some good points here, and I think he's looking for answers to his questions. And I'm not sure. I won't speak for Mr. Desjardins, but needlessly talking around it, I don't think is helpful to address his concerns and perhaps win his vote. So, Mr. Fragascatos, on that note, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. One is directly on the sub-amendment. And yes, Mr. Janis is excited. I'm talking about the sub-amendment. And we've all been talking about the sub-amendment, whether or not my Conservative friends on the other side recognize that. All the points have related back to that sub-amendment, as you've seen, Mr. Chair. Regarding the sub-amendment, there's an unintended consequence here, and that is something I've pointed out before, but let me be more specific. This is taking us away again from the vital work of the committee. We are slated to study, I hope it's not going to be interrupted entirely, connectivity in rural and remote areas, something that I know Conservative colleagues have raised in the past, quite rightly. It is something that is impacting the country. I don't come from a rural area, Mr. Chair, but just outside of London, Ontario, there's a lot of, it's a huge agricultural region, very rural, and connectivity continues to be a challenge. Now, the government has, I think, made very important steps in this direction in terms of ensuring greater connectivity, and I think we're getting there, but I would like to work on that. And I know certainly colleagues on this side feel that same way. I hope colleagues on the other side feel that way as well. In addition, I see that we're slated to look at access to safe drinking water in First Nations communities. This is, I think, a moral obligation in addition to it being a parliamentary obligation, Mr. Chair. Again, we've spent a lot of time on this sub-amendment that I've made the point before. I don't see its value in terms of helping this motion become stronger or in line with an outcome that would ensure that public servants do not break the law. It is having another unintended effect, of course, and that is delaying us from our work. So that's the point I did want to make, Mr. Chair, in general terms on again, an unintended consequence of our colleagues' sub-amendment. I do want a point of clarification, though, Mr. Chair, and here I'll just ask Mr. Desjardins if he wishes to go on the record again. I'd want more information on what he's exactly aiming at and what his concerns are. He mentions the Fraser Institute, for example. It's an interesting point, and perhaps I've missed it, but what is the thinking behind what he's raising? I think it's again, and Mr. Janis himself admitted that it's interesting. So to me, that shows an openness to what Mr. Desjardins is saying. If Mr. Desjardins could expand on that point, Mr. Chair, that he raised earlier, that would be very appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. I will ask you. I'm going to ask you to expand. Without repeating, I do want to try to keep this moving forward, but the floor is yours. And I will just highlight again. I'd ask everyone to refer to both the sub-amendment and the motion itself. This is a request for documents. So discussing, but I will allow a few minutes, Mr. Discussing kind of broader topics is something we certainly can. It's either suited for other committee business or subcommittee business. But over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is how I see the order of events in my mind. So it was when we say in relation to the motion we're talking about is the motion that was passed, of course, in a consensus fashion, tabled by myself and the New Democratic Party to look into foreign interference as it relates to the Pierre Trudeau Foundation. And of course, how events have transpired since then have left it so that we have little recourse to find ways to get to the bottom of foreign interference. So foreign interference to me is the most important aspect of this investigation, Mr. Chair. It's not that we find ways to create an affiliation between the Liberal Party and the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. That's, a partisan interest that I definitely have an appetite to pursue. But of course, our job here is to make sure that we get to the bottom of foreign interference. At least that's how I entered this discussion, with the hopes that we'd have support towards. And so looking at foreign interference in Canada, and the fact that we have an example, which the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation may be one, to which foreign interference has taken place by way of donations, it is not unreasonable, Mr. Chair, to suggest that there are other organizations in Canada that are part and parcel of this industry. And I say industry because I believe, in my perspective, at least in the media's perspective, that it's not only the Liberal Party, but also the Conservative Party, maybe even the Democratic Party, maybe even the Bloc Québécois. But I do think that it's incumbent that we take that kind of fairness approach if we're going to be using this kind of power to have the CRA give us documents, the power to secure and second documents of a private organization. I do accept what Mr. Genius has said in relation to the unique nature of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, but I also believe there's unique aspects to other organizations that have found work-ins or ways around. And for the benefit of a study, should we really be interested as a committee in tackling foreign interference, we would take all available information toward that study should we not have confirmation that the Auditor General, which we do, does not have a mandate to pursue, or the CRA, as evidenced by our investigation thus far. The CRA has been clear that they have to withhold throughout their investigation an independent aspect towards this. And so those things together, Mr. Chair, all of those factors together lead me to the position that we will not get the answers we are seeking in relation to our request for clarity on foreign interference should we not take the opportunity to expand our investigation. I just think it's just, why, if we really want to get down to that, why not take the opportunity right now? And I understand there could be, fear by the Conservatives to expand this, but taking the credible argument that Mr. McCauley made at the very beginning, that if the Conservatives were a formed government, they would be so happy and open to have this investigation done, albeit because we're dealing with such an important issue like foreign interference. Why not? Why would we wait for an election to do that, considering how sensitive this process is? I suggest that since we've already, there's been a filibuster here on the table on this for pretty much all day, it's my suggestion that with the 15 minutes we have remaining, Mr. Chair, that we try to sort out what kind of possible amendments we can use to this motion that would actually get to the bottom of what we want to see here, which is foreign interference. And so if I could bring the attention back of the committee to how important this study really is, to the transparency of how organizations participate in Canada, That would be my objective. But I'm not okay just going down a random witch hunt on one organization if we're not going to get the results that we need on a study of foreign interference. And I'm sure many of my colleagues around the table would see that clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Fragascatos. I am going to give you the floor, but I'm going to press that we stay focused, and I think you can do that. Thank you.
Very focused, Mr. Chair. I move to adjourn debate.
Call that roll call, please.
Mr. Genuis,
No.
Mr. Cram,
Opposed?
Mr. McCauley,
No.
Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés,
Non.
Mr. Desjarlais,
No.
Miss Bradford,
Yes.
Mr. Fragascatos,
Yes.
Miss Shanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu,
Yes.
Miss Yip,
Yes.
yeas pour 5, nays contre 5.
I'm also going to cast my vote to end this debate. Committee members, we can come back to another time. Madame Sinclair, do you have a point? Okay, then let me turn to another item which I would like to discuss with you all. It involves our meeting a week today. I will say this will also allow members to convene amongst themselves about next steps, both for, in particular, this motion, because I'm sure it's going to come back to the floor, and I'm going to be more vigilant in the next meeting about staying on that amendment. So if you have discussions amongst yourselves about next steps, please have them. But this, when we come back to this motion, it is going to be on the sub-amendment and the motion itself. Of course, members can talk at length on that, but it will be a focused discussion when this comes back. Next, we have a meeting scheduled for a week today with individuals that have involvement with the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. I regret to inform you all that I have 3 that have declined. They include the Right Honourable David Johnson, Mr. Edward Johnson, and Mr. Mel Cap. So I'm looking for your instructions or direction on this or comments how we should proceed. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's frustrating. We're not getting documents because of filibusters, and we're not getting witnesses wanting to show up either. We have a job to do to try to get to the bottom of what has been happening at the Trudeau Foundation, and we're not getting documents and we're not getting witnesses. That is repeated stonewalling, enabled, it seems, by the government, but also from people involved. So I will try again to help us get to the bottom of this, and we'll see if we have more success on this. Chair, I would like to move that in relation to its study of the Trudeau Foundation, the committee authorize the chair to summon witnesses on its behalf. I think we can trust you to exercise that power judiciously, and to try to ease up to that. But we have 1 week. We have it seems almost nobody that's agreed to appear. So empowering our chair to act on our behalf in this regard will ensure that we hear from the witnesses that members have requested to hear from. Thank you.
Thank you. You are correct. We have at this point no one willing to appear. Mr. Desjarlais, your hand is up. You have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And I will say, just 1 second, Mr. And so, Mr. Genuis' motion is on the floor, and it is in order, and it is debatable.
Oh, sorry. Well, I guess, can I speak to 2 things, Mr. Chair? One, just can we have the motion in writing in probably both official languages for Natalie?
Sure. Well,
but also, go ahead.
Talking. Just 1 second. Yeah. Yeah. We will endeavor to get it out in the meantime, and we'll have it read out again, and interpretation, I'm sure, will assist with that. So over to you, Mr. Desjarlais.
So just to the I agree, first of all, that of the comments made by Mr. Genuis. I disagree, of course, with other forces, that force being yourself, Mr. Chair. We can go back 3 minutes ago and know that you broke a tie in this vote. So I want to be very clear as the Conservative chair. In your case, Mr. Chair, that would be yourself who broke a tie there. So I want to make certain that the facts are all very clear. On the actual motion itself, when we do get the translation back, I think it would also be important if we could maybe even find a way to read into that original motion that Mr. Januis just read out to actually clarify that first fact you mentioned, to state that because there's been a no, like we received a no to our invitation, which is why we're having that motion, I think would be important to the narrative of that motion, because that's, of course, an extraordinary power that we're only going to be using mainly because of the adverse reaction of those witnesses to not coming here. And I think that's an important piece to demonstrate really the reluctance here.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. I am sorry. I had noticed you a few minutes ago, and I apologize for keeping you in suspense with your hand up. But you do have the floor. Colleagues, I am going to adjourn this, or look for your permission to adjourn this meeting at 1 o'clock. You're welcome to reject that, in which case I'll turn the chair over to Ms. Yip. But I do have to turn my attention to my riding after this. So, Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Yes, and Chair, please let me extend my good wishes there for everyone in your riding. As you know, I have family there as well, so I'm in communication with them as well. So, yes, very disturbing. But on this summons, so again, this is typically not something that we have in this committee. So I would, and it does seem like a drastic step. So I would like to understand more about the reasons, and sometimes the witnesses do provide reasons as to why they don't wish to appear. And typically committees try to work with witnesses around those reasons, because we would, of course, prefer to have willing witnesses rather than otherwise. So that's a question that I have through you to the clerk. And I want to have a better understanding of, is there not more of a step-by-step rather than going, dramatically to what I believe is the final step, usually after a step-by-step process. And it's clear to me that this is, we need more information and discussion on this step. Thank you.
Mr. Fragas, would you like me to respond quickly, or do you want to take the floor? You're on. You're down.
Respond, and then I'll speak.
So I won't get into particulars, but it has been frustrating. We had one witness who we were told was away, at which point I changed the meeting date by a week, and the response came back, no, which is to me we made every effort to change our schedule to accommodate this witness, but when we did so, the response was one I had not expected. Another witness simply did not respond, and another just indicated they had nothing to contribute because of a change in role. So that's it in a nutshell. And I'm happy to go back to them with your directions. Mr. Fragas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All of us take parliamentary committees very seriously, and when witnesses are called, there has to be a seriousness attached to that. However, a move to summon witnesses, as this motion calls for, I think is a giant leap in the wrong direction. I don't see the need for a formal summons at this point. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, you can go back again, and not everybody, for example, will understand the nature of parliamentary committees and their importance in terms of our overall governance, if I can put it that way. A summons at this point in time doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I can recall also, Chair, not in particular on this committee, but on previous committees, where something similar has transpired, and a point of clarification is resent to the individual or individuals that wish to the committee wishes to hear from, and things are resolved at that point in time, without a summons, without anything like that. I think that we also have to think long and hard about what kind of precedent this committee sets, in addition, of course, to other committees. If we are going to be summoning witnesses left and right, it doesn't really make for a cooperative, good relationship between parliamentary committees and prospective witnesses. I can only recall once in my time as a member of Parliament where I've seen a formal summons issued. It is, as I say, it represents an extraordinary step, one that, based on even what you just read, Chair, I still do not think is warranted at this point in time.
Thank you. Mr. Genuis.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, so my frustration today is that we've really got nothing done. We have tried to request documents related to our investigation in the Trudeau Foundation. Liberals have filibustered it. We're now trying to create a mechanism by which we can get witnesses for our investigation into the Trudeau Foundation, and the Liberals have excuses. I don't have a great appetite to go, past our scheduled time. It's either the government's interested in doing this or not, and we have to keep coming back to it in subsequent meetings. But I will say very clearly to Mr. Fragaskatos that the motion I put forward does not summon witnesses. It authorizes the chair to summon witnesses on our behalf to ensure we get witnesses by next week. I suspect what the chair will do is he will follow up with these witnesses. He will inform them that the committee has authorized him to summon them and that it is important that they provide more serious explanations or come. And this motion provides the chair with the means to ensure that we have witnesses related to the Trudeau Foundation. It does not jump the gun. It does not prescribe that the chair will immediately jump to a summons. It is right and reasonable that the chair might try to engage in some dialogue first. But if the committee insists on prescribing every single step, I would submit to you that that's an obvious delay tactic because we don't come back till Thursday. So if we decide today we're going to ask the chair to send a letter, then we don't get a response to the letter by Thursday, then we have to have another motion to order the summons, and I suspect we'll see more of this delay tactic from the government. So again, I think it's either members are willing to help us get documents or witnesses, or both, or government members are continuing to put up roadblocks. The motion is clear. It does not summon witnesses. It gives the power to the chair to summon witnesses as may be required to ensure that we hear from witnesses. I hope we're able to go to a vote on this today. If not, again, the posture of the government will be clear as they continue to disrupt this committee's ability to actually investigate the Trudeau Foundation. And paradoxically, they say it's because we've got all these other things to study. Well, if we've got all these other things to study, great. Let's get to votes on these motions in a reasonable frame of time so that we can complete the business we have in front of us.
Thank you. Mr. Fragaskatos and Madame Sinclair.
Actually, I'll yield to Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, and then I'll speak, Chair.
Très bien. Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Go ahead, please. I just wanted to point out that I am in full agreement with what my colleague, Mr. Genuis, just said. I believe that this motion gives potential flexibility to our chair so that he can call the witnesses who are important. It's important to get to the matter. We have all voted in favor of this study of the Trudeau Foundation. We have to have witnesses agree to come. The witness list was developed with the assistance of all the members present here, so I just don't see why we wouldn't authorize the committee chair to discuss with witnesses and tell them that they could be called to come, and this would convince them to come. I support the motion.
Thank you, Chair. And in fact, I did not register my concern and regret to hear what's happening in your riding. I know Ms. Yip and Ms. Bradford will certainly feel that way. I don't know that they're on the speakers list, but let me just, I'm going to speak for them here. This is, I've been to New Brunswick, I've been to your riding. It is a beautiful place, and I hope everything is all right in the end. Chair, I don't sense that we're going to get resolution on this. I emphasize the point that I made before. I don't see it's any different than what Mr. Genesis has pointed to in nuance. I still maintain the point. With that in mind, and knowing how difficult of a day it is for you, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
On division, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.